Resourceful Designer, episode 248, presenting with the 10-20-30 rule.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. His favorite thing to wear is a zip-up hoodie, Mark Dickote.
What? They're just comfy. Am I right? Anyway, in this episode, I'm going to share a sales tactic that could help you win over more clients when presenting to them. I'm also going to share an easy tip for taking full-length screenshots of a website. Now, what have I been up to? Well, in case you were unaware, I do another podcast besides this one, which is what actually got me into the podcast space. And that one is a TV fan podcast for the television show The Expanse, which airs on Amazon Prime. Now, if you're familiar with The Expanse and you want to check out my podcast, it's called The Expanse Podcast, Tales from the Rocinante. Well, The Expanse Season 5 just wrapped up last week. It's done for the season, which means that I am going to have some extra time on my hands until Season 6 comes towards the end of the year, if then. So I've been squeezing my day job, if you want to call it that, into 4 days over the last 10 weeks because my Fridays have been taken up with The Expanse podcast. Well, now that that one's done and it's on hiatus, it frees up some extra time for me because now I could use the full 5 days in a week in order to do my design work. And I'm really looking forward to putting that time to some good use. Now, as for work that I've been doing lately, I had 5 new podcast artwork orders this week. 3 of them through my podcast branding website and 2 of them through one of the agencies I do artwork for podcasting. I started on a new website build for a client, and I've got another one in the works that I should be starting next week. And I'm also working on an icon design for an app, which is kind of fun because even though a lot of people think an icon and a logo are similar, they're not. So there's a little bit of thought that has to go into creating this square icon that might be seen without any wording around it and still have to represent the app. So I've been having a little bit of fun contemplating or conceptualizing that one. I haven't actually started the design phase of it, but just coming up with ideas in my head. It's a fun challenge. So that's a little bit of what I've been up to this week. Now, something else that's fun is the Resourceful Designer community. As I've stated previously on the podcast, the community is currently closed for new members. It will be opening again on March 1st. But anybody who signed up for my waiting list prior to February 1st was granted early access, and we're getting to know some of the new members who have joined. If you were one of the people who signed up to be notified, please check your email. I did send you a message telling you how you can join early and with the special bonus that I had mentioned on the podcast. But this week we had a special video chat meeting where we discuss critiquing work, whether it's critiquing our own work or critiquing other people's work or just receiving critiques from people and how to handle them. So that was a really great conversation. We're going to have some other ones as well. I'm in the works of trying to find somebody that is a social media expert to come in and present to the community on how best to use social media to grow a graphic design or web design business. So lots of stuff happening within the community, lots of friendships being made, work being shared, and all sorts of stuff. And as I said, the community will be open again for registration on March 1st. And when that time comes, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community in order to join. And now, this week's tip of the week. This week's tip comes to you, well, via me, but through something I saw on Twitter. And this only applies if you have an iPhone. I'm sorry if you have an Android or any other device, this doesn't work for you, but you have to have an iPhone for this to work. And the trick is, whenever you take a screenshot of a web page, and you have to be using Safari. This also, by the way, works in Mail, the Mail app, not Gmail, but Mail that comes with your iPhone. If you take a screenshot, then the little icon or preview appears in the bottom left-hand corner. If you click on that and open it up, and that's usually where you can add notes or crop or whatever. But if you're taking a screenshot of a web page, at the top of that news screen, wherever you can edit the image, you have the choice of screenshot or full page. And if you toggle it to full page, that screenshot now becomes a screenshot of the entire page from top to bottom, no matter how long the page is. And instead of saving it as a photo, you now have the option to save it as a PDF to your files on your phone. So I know there are plugins on Chrome and there's tools. Paparazzi is one that I've used before that allows you to take full-length screenshots. But now it's so easy to do the mobile version of it on your iPhone. Simply take a screenshot, toggle it at the top to full screen, and then save a PDF to your files. And it's one of those features that it just blew up on Twitter because it's probably been there for a while and it's just nobody really knew about it. It's one of those features that Apple really didn't announce very much. And now that people have found it, they're amazed by this capability that they didn't know their iPhone could do. And I know I was one of them. So if you didn't know you can take full page screenshots on a website on your iPhone, there you go. And that's this week's Tip of the Week. And now, presenting with the 10-20-30 rule. I'm going to be making a presentation at the beginning of March at a podcast virtual summit. And my presentation is titled, although it's just a working title now, but it's titled 5 Essential Elements for Your Podcast Website If You Want Your Show to Succeed. Well, earlier this week, I was working on the slides for my presentation, and I started thinking of the 10-20-30 rule when it comes to slides. Have you ever heard of this rule? Some people like to call it the 10-20-30 PowerPoint rule or rule of PowerPoint. But the same principle applies to anything you do. I mean, I use Keynote, I don't use PowerPoint, but it's still the same. Now, this rule was coined several years ago by Guy Kawasaki. Guy Kawasaki is a venture capitalist. And if you're not sure what a venture capitalist is, it's basically somebody who has a lot of money and wants to invest in a bunch of different businesses or products and such. If you're familiar with the television show Shark Tank, all the sharks are venture capitalists. Well, Guy Kawasaki has been a venture capitalist since I think it was back in the 80s he started. And he would sit through dozens and dozens of presentations every day. That was his business. Listen to people who had an idea for a business or a product or a service, listen to their presentation and determine whether it's something he wanted to invest in. Well, over time, Kawasaki started to notice that the presentations that he was most likely to want to invest in all followed a similar formula. And taking note of this, he coined the term the 10-20-30 rule. And the rule is simply this: 10 slides, 20 minutes, minimum of 30-point type. That's it. And according to Kawasaki, this setup gives you the best chance of making a positive impression on the person or people you're presenting to. Now, of course, Kawasaki was talking about people pitching business or product ideas to venture capitalists, but the same principle applies to you, a designer who's pitching your ideas to a client. So let me break it down. Rule number 1, 10 slides, and this is actually up to 10 slides. Kawasaki pointed out that it's very hard for someone to comprehend more than 10 concepts in a meeting. If you try, you're more likely to confuse the person. And if you're confusing a person, especially a venture capitalist, then the idea becomes very risky. And a venture capitalist does not like risk. So for your slides, you need to keep it to under 10 slides and follow the KISS principle. That's KISS, and if you're not sure, that stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. And limiting your presentation to only 10 slides or 10 sheets of paper, if that's the way you're presenting, does just that. Now, breaking down your presentation slide to 10 points, one per slide, may be something like this. Slide number 1 showcases your interpretation of who your client is. Slide number 2, it identifies the client's competition. Slide number 3 identifies the problem the client is facing, why they're hiring you. Slide number 4, the solution that you are proposing to the client. Slide number 5, how this solution will solve the client's problem. Slide number 6, examples of your solution in place, mock-ups and such. Slide number 7, projections and outcomes from implementing your solution. Slide number 8, timeline for the project. Slide number 9, the cost of the project. And slide number 10, a summary and call to action for the client to take. Now, this example uses the full maximum 10 slides, but if you can do it in less, then all the better. But more than 10 slides, and you may confuse the people you're presenting to. Now, rule number 2 is keep it under 20 minutes. It doesn't matter if you're allotted 30 minutes or an hour, your actual presentation should take no more than 20 minutes. If you can't present your idea within that time frame, you're doing something wrong. Have you ever heard of TED Talks? Well, if you want to talk at a TED event, there are a lot of rules you have to adhere by. And one of those rules is that your talk has to have a maximum length of 18 minutes. Now, TED organizer chose this time based on some neuroscience research that says 18 minutes is long enough for a speaker to flesh out their idea, but also short enough for a listener to take it in, digest what they're hearing, and understand all of the important information. Longer than that, and people's minds will start to wander and you'll lose them. Not only that, but the TED organizers know that shorter presentations require you to edit things down to the most important and relevant material. So if you have more time allotted to you, if the client says we'll do a 30-minute meeting or 40 or a 1-hour meeting, use the other time for introductions, for setting up your equipment, making sure everybody is comfortable, and also leave time afterwards for Q&A and some conversation. Plus, you never know when some sort of emergency may arise that cuts the meeting short. So 20 minutes is the ideal time to keep someone's interest in what you're showing them. Longer than that, and you risk them missing critical points to what you're saying. And rule number 3, 30 point size minimum. Now, as a designer, I trust that you know that slides or presentation papers are most effective when they contain very little wording. I'm hoping I don't have to explain that to you. Well, this 10, 20, 30 rule was written for people pitching a product or business idea, not for experienced designers. But just the same, it's something to remember when you create your presentation slides or handouts. Using a larger point size forces you to cut back on unnecessary verbiage. The only reason to have smaller type on a slide is in order to cram in more text. But by doing so, your client, one, may think that you're not familiar with your material and that you need your slides to act as a teleprompter, and that in turn makes them feel like you're not that invested in what you're presenting. And 2, the more type you have on a slide, the more your client will focus on reading the slide and not listening to what you have to say. You know what I mean. We've all done it before, sitting at a presentation where the slides are full of text and you end up reading them and not paying attention to the presenter. To avoid this, make sure that your fonts are 30 points or larger. So forget the bullet lists and instead tell your clients the key points. It'll mean much more to them coming out of your mouth than reading words on a screen or a sheet of paper. Now, as a comparison, Steve Jobs, like him or like Apple or not, you cannot dispute that Steve Jobs was a great presenter. Well, he always insisted on 96-point type minimum for his presentation slides. And if it's good enough for the head of a multi-billion-dollar company, it should be good enough for you. So that's it. Very simple 10, 20, 30 rule. Maximum of 10 slides, maximum of 20 minutes, minimum of 30-point font. Now, as a bonus, Guy Kawasaki also said that the most persuasive presentations that he ever sat through normally used white type on a black or dark colored background. The way Kawasaki puts it is, anyone can put black type on a white background. It's the default in all programs. However, white type on a dark background is something you have to consciously do, and it shows that you've put some effort into your presentation. Not to mention that white type on a dark background looks classier and it is easier to read. Don't believe me? Think of movie credits. How often do you see black type on a white background in movie credits? Hardly ever. More than 90% of the time, you'll see white text on a dark colored background. And you can learn from that. So that's presenting with the 10-20-30 rule. Now, I would love to know, do you already use this formula when you're creating your presentations for your clients? Let me know by leaving a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 248. Now, before I go, I just want to remind you that the Resourceful Designer community will be open again on March 1st for new members. And if you're interested in joining a great community of designers dedicated to growing their design business and helping each other out, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community. And if you're an iPhone user, why don't you test out full page screen captures of websites? Take a screenshot, edit the screenshot, and at the top, toggle it over to full page. Just another tool that you can add to your arsenal. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you know a fellow designer that you think can benefit from this podcast, please let them know. Just tell them to search for Resourceful Designer anywhere you listen to audio. So until next week, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.